All right, try it again. Time to get serious. Let's talk God. I'm David, and welcome back to COC. I mentioned this in the last episode. Some of the greatest coaches and players in history have said that the key to mastering their sport was to master the basics or the fundamentals. As we start to build a firm or firmer foundation for our faith, that's exactly what we're going to do too. And there's no better place to start than right here. Do you believe in God? It is the most important question you will ever answer in your entire life. Every human being has an intrinsic desire, a spiritual intuition to believe in something. Not even the staunchest unbeliever can deny that religion is a human universal, appearing in every culture in the history of the world, even in the most remote places cut off from the rest of civilization. There has never been a people who didn't believe in something divine and or some kind of afterlife. Is this it? Or is there more? When you think about it, we're all religious. It's just what we believe in and worship that's different. I mean, we all have to have some kind of faith in certain axioms and presuppositions in order to even live life. That song right there isn't a religious song. That's a classic 80s song that I figure most of us have heard before. But even though it's not a religious song, there is kind of a religious element to it. If you listen to the lyrics, this song says that there must be a higher something somewhere, a higher love, because without it, life is wasted time. I want to preface with something here. I'm well aware that there are people who spend virtually their whole lives debating and studying the existence of God, so I have no expectations or illusions that I'm going to be able to definitively answer the question of whether or not God exists in a couple of episodes on this channel. However, might as well give it a shot. Let's define our terms first. Who or what is God? As you can imagine, many definitions of God have been offered over the centuries. One of the most famous ones was by a Catholic monk named St. Anselm, who said that God is the greatest conceivable being. Unbelievers will often challenge us to provide a definition of God. What do we mean by God? What God are we talking about? Well, here it is. God is the greatest conceivable or the greatest possible being. Many beings exist, including you and I, but there is one being who is perfect, one being who is maximally good or great, one being that is the ultimate standard by which we measure everything. And because this being is perfect or maximally good or great, this being we call God is supreme. Supremacy by definition can only be one thing. So this is why we don't believe in polytheism, which says that there are many gods and goddesses. Because if there are many gods and goddesses, none of them are supreme because they're all limited to a particular area of expertise. Not to mention the fact that if there were many gods and goddesses, we would have complete chaos all the time because they would fight each other. We also don't believe in pantheism, which says that everything is God, because that would mean that everything is supreme, which would mean that nothing is. Nobody can deny that there's a consistency across life. Animals, plants, people, we all share DNA in the same genetic code, so it's pretty obvious that life is all coming from the same source. But we come from the source. We're not the source. We believe in one supreme God, and because God is supreme, God has three major incommunicable attributes: omniscience, all-knowing; omnipotence, all-powerful; and omnibenevolence, all-loving. We as Christians believe in one greatest conceivable, one perfect, one maximally good or great, one ultimate standard, one supreme being called God. But why? Well, before I explain why we do, let's look at reasons why people don't. Before we try to make our case, let's put ourselves in the other side's shoes and try to see where unbelievers are coming from. Why don't people believe in God? What are some of the reasons you've heard? What are some of the major defeater arguments?
What are the 5 best reasons why there is no God? What are the 5 reasons why there are no fairies? The onus is not upon an atheist to say why there is not something. The onus is on a theist to say why there is.
Because religion is not provided to us by revelation. It doesn't come from the heavens. It doesn't come from the beyond. It doesn't come from the divine. It's man-made.
Some unbelievers look at belief in God from a philosophical perspective.
Nobody exists on purpose. Nobody belongs anywhere. Everybody's gonna die.
They look at things like the problem of evil and wonder how a loving God could possibly allow so much pain and suffering in the world. In fact, maybe belief in God is what causes a lot of pain and suffering in the first place. Some of them wonder why bad things happen to good people. Or on the flip side, why do good things happen to bad people? How can a loving God send people to hell? Or some unbelievers look at belief in God from a scientific perspective. They wonder how we can explain things like the age of the earth and the universe, the Big Bang Theory, chance, probability, free will, dinosaurs, evolution, how long human beings have been around. Or they wonder, if God created everything, who created God? Or many unbelievers have other reasons why they don't believe in God. Some of them think that all religions are basically the same, they're just expressed differently. Some of them think the main point of religion is to create morality, but we can have morality without organized religion. Some of them consider themselves spiritual, but not religious, and they believe in some kind of higher power. But it's kind of like nailing Jell-O to the wall. It's hard to define it or put a name to it. Some of them think some of us just have brains that are hardwired to believe. Some of them think belief in God is like a placebo. They can see how it works for some people, but it doesn't work for them. Some of them subscribe to the black swan fallacy. They've never had a God experience, so nobody else has either. All these other people are just delusional. Some unbelievers see what big hypocrites and meanies a lot of believers are, and that's a major turnoff. Some of them are agnostic and don't know if they believe in God or not. Some of them are an apatheist and don't even see the point of believing in God or not. And some of them identify as one of a host of other types of unbelievers. Some of them call themselves an existentialist, a free thinker, a humanist, a materialist, a naturalist, or maybe just a skeptic in general. Whatever their label, unbelievers have a wide range of reasons about why they don't believe in God. Here's a question to ask them. What would it take to convince you that God is real? What would you accept as evidence? Would you accept anything? Or is your mind already made up? And if it is, why? Check your bias and your willful ignorance at the door for a minute. If you really want the truth, why are you willing to follow the evidence wherever it leads? Even if it leads to an uncomfortable conclusion. It kind of reminds me of the famous quote, "Convince a man against his will, he's of the same opinion still." It's interesting to note that some of the greatest believers in God throughout history, C.S. Lewis, Alistair McGrath, Edith Stein, Lee Strobel, were unbelievers early in their lives. In fact, here's what Lee Strobel had to say when he left atheism and became a believer. "To continue in atheism, I would need to believe that nothing produces everything. Non-life produces life. Randomness produces fine-tuning. Chaos produces information. Unconsciousness produces consciousness, and non-reason produces reason." Have you ever wondered how many true unbelievers there really are? There's no doubt that there's some, but you have to wonder this because it's impossible to prove that God doesn't exist. Nobody could ever do that definitively. So it has to be that people either don't know if God exists, which would make them agnostic, or they refuse to believe that God exists. In other words, they don't want to believe in God. Maybe they don't like being told what to do. Maybe they're afraid of God. Maybe they're mad at God.
I hate you. I hate you.
Have you also ever wondered why some unbelievers are so aggressive or militant in their unbelief? They don't believe in God, and they don't think anybody else should either. You see, I believe in God, and I'm commanded by Him to tell others about Him. That's my motivation here. So I would love to ask these angry atheists a question. What's your motivation? I mean, if God doesn't exist, why do you care what anybody believes about anything? If God isn't real, won't we all just figure that out eventually? Just like we did with Zeus, or Hercules, or Poseidon. Won't we all just eventually reach that conclusion without your help? The critic, like Richard Dawkins we heard earlier, says, "The onus is on the believer to prove to me that God exists, not on me to prove He doesn't." Then why are you spending all your time and energy to prove God doesn't exist if the burden of proof is on me to prove He does? If the onus is on me to prove God exists, why do you spend your whole life trying to prove He doesn't? Is there not a better way to spend your life? Are you just bored? Are you just a bully and you like to pick on people of faith? Are you getting rich off this? Help me understand why you tell me you don't believe in anything, but then you write a 300-page book telling me what you believe about everything. I don't have to tell people that I don't believe in the flying spaghetti monster. I don't have to write a book about it. I don't have to start a podcast or a social media channel about it. I don't go to conventions or seminars once a year to celebrate it. And I've never, ever felt the need to tell people that I'm an unspaghetti monster believing person. It's not part of my identity. So again, I ask you, if it's obvious that God doesn't exist, why do you feel the need to tell people this? G.K. Chesterton once said, "If there were no God, there would be no atheists." In other words, if God isn't real, there's nothing for atheists to atheate. It's almost like you say God doesn't exist and you don't like Him. But the critic responds, "Well, I don't want people to believe a lie." Why? What does it matter to you? What do you want from believers exactly? The critic responds, "Well, I want people to know the truth. I don't want people to waste their lives." Why? If it doesn't affect you personally, why do you care how anybody spends their life? The critic responds, "Well, I don't want people to believe in some invisible man in the sky, some sky daddy. I don't believe in anything I can't see." Really? You don't believe in anything you can't see? Can you see bad? Can you see good? Can you see justice? Can you see truth? Did you see evolution? How about the economy? We all know the economy exists, right? Where is it? Point to the economy right now. Come on. Of course you believe in things you can't see. We all do. As I mentioned in the last episode, I spent several years in a spiritual freefall, and I didn't know what I believed about anything. That's one of the reasons I resonate with a lot of unbelievers, is because I know where they're coming from. However, one of the things that eventually led me back to belief in God is the fact that unbelief is kind of lazy. Think about it. It's the easiest position to take. I don't believe in anything about anything. How much intellectual firepower do you have to believe in nothing? Needless to say, this wasn't even remotely satisfying. So I ultimately found my way back to God. But why? What convinced me? In the next episode, we're going to answer that question. Now that we've looked at some of the major reasons why people don't believe in God, we're going to look at some of the major reasons why we Christians do.
You were raised Catholic, right?
I was raised Catholic.
Come on back, Bill. The door is always open.
I hope you enjoyed this, because that's all I've got for now. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We'll talk again soon, but before you go, take this with you.
Don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader. Your sad devotion to that ancient religion has not helped you conjure up the stolen data tapes, or given you clairvoyance enough to find the rebels' hidden fort.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.